I'm back to talk about Robert E. Howard. I'm doing a Robert E. Howard read starting back in September, a 9-month year, a school year read of all his books that are published in Del Rey. Not the two best of volumes, but all the individual volumes. And I threw a couple other things in there too. I started with Skullface, which is kind of a Fu Manchu, Yellow Scare kind of story, which I didn't care for that much. I did a video about that. And then next I did, who did I do? The Puritan guy, Solomon Kane, which I also didn't like. I hate to be a bummer. I just didn't feel like Solomon Kane has that much of a character compared to some of the other Howard heroes. And so those were not the best start. But then things got better. A couple after that, the next thing I read was, let me bring it up here. This one, Bran McMorn, The Last King, which is a Celtic hero. Is the best story in here. Not all the stories in here are that great. The best one here, the most famous one, I believe, is called Worms of the Earth, which is a terrific story. I'd highly recommend that for anybody who likes Conan or Call and things like that. It's a fascinating volume to read because it talks a lot, there's a lot of ancillary, there's a lot of bonus material in these books. All the fragments, some of those are better than others. There was a really good fragment though. I haven't got the text of the book pulled up, but he was fascinated by the Celts. He tells a story about he found a book written for children or written for young adults about the Picts. The Picts in a library in New Orleans when he was there as a young man visiting, and he became very interested in them, and he wrote about them throughout his whole life, which apparently, according to the different scholars writing in here and all that, was not his usual habit. He tended to write about a character for a while and stop writing. Like, for example, he stopped writing Solomon Kane and he stopped writing Kull and he started writing Conan. And even though when he was writing Conan, people in Weird Tales were still writing in asking for more Solomon Kane and Kull stories, his mind didn't work that way. He would work with a character, and then when he was done, he was done. Same thing happened with Conan. Who knows what he would have gone back to. It's kind of hard to say, when you have an incredibly short life that he had as a writer, and he probably was only active like 10 years, 12 years, something like that, since he died at 30. We know all that. I got to stop clearing my throat because I'm doing it right into the microphone. So that was really good. This has been a while ago since I read that, though, so I can't really talk about it that much. But it was I felt a lot better having read that because, like I said, I didn't get that really of a great start with Conan like I wanted. With Howard like I wanted. Now I'm going to find the other picture. The one I read after that was, this is another interesting volume. It's probably the weakest of all the collections. It's called Swordwoman. It's historical adventures, so non-fantasy historical adventures. So, action type stories that are all mostly all set in like the Ottoman Empire and the Crusades. Swordwoman is about a character. These are actually, there's two stories and one fragment about this character, Dark Agnes. However you say it. I think Agnes is how you say it in French, and she's a French character. She's probably an homage or inspired by C.L. Moore's character, Jurel of Jory. I'm sure I said that wrong too. He's a famous character. C.L. Moore's a great writer. Her Jory's stories are a well-known early sword and sorcery series that also published in Weird Tales. Apparently, he sent the first story to her, kind of to get her approval or whatever, since he was doing kind of a similar thing. The stories were never published. He wrote two, which were straight historicals, and then he wrote a third, which was which is included here, which was incomplete and it's very clear it was going to be a supernatural story. So maybe he was trying to revive the character, or thinking about, turning the character into a sword and sorcery heroine, so he could market those to Weird Tales. But we don't know what would have happened with that. But those stories are very good. The other stories are uneven. There's a couple really good ones, and some that are a lot of them are quite very similar in plot to each other. It'll be a bunch of guys, and they're all really basically known by their race. Like there's a Frank, and there's a Pict, and there's a Turk, and there's a Gaul, and there's a Arab, and he had originally tried to write historical stories and sell them to Adventure magazine, which was one of the top pulps, like just below a Slick magazine, like the highest paying, most prestigious of the pulp magazines. He tried to sell there. He never was able to break into that market. It's kind of sad today to think about that. But then again, if you I don't know who appeared in Adventure magazine offhand. It's not one of those magazines that's just known for its great stable, like I would say the big three that people still think of today would be Weird Tales, of course, Astounding for science fiction, Unknown, although it was a shorter run, and of course one more that I'm just not remembering. Black Mask for crime stories, which was the home of, which started the careers of Earl Stanley Gardner, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, and dozens of others that we still read today, much like Weird Tales did for fantasy fiction, for Howard, of course, and Lovecraft, and Clark Ashton Smith, and C.L. Moore, and many other, Robert Bloch even, and a little bit later on. And but at the time, Howard was not a roaring success, which is terrible to think about, and it probably contributed. Well, I don't want to get too far into that. There's two biographies that I bought. There's two recent biographies. I think Michael K. Vaughan's reviewed both of them, but I'm going to also read those after I read all these other things I've got listed for him. So I was not particularly looking forward to this as the best volume. It's some lesser known stories, but they're good. They're action packed. You definitely want to read them if you like all Howard's other action stuff. Also, previously I had read, I don't know if I think I did a video on the first few. I read the Sailor Steve Costigan boxing stories, and of everything I've read so far, those are by far my favorite. And it was a collection I have just called Boxing Stories, and there's, I believe, only one that does, or two that doesn't have Steve Costigan as the hero. There's one called The Iron Man, which is probably his most famous boxing story. It's a really good story, too, a very well written, very powerful story that does not feature, that mentions another boxer called Steve Costigan and his brother Mike Costigan, who is not the hero of the story either, who's a man named Iron Mike. I hope I didn't talk about this before because it'd be boring, but that's probably one of his most masterfully constructed stories of what I've read so far. But those Dark Agnes stories probably second best. I like them more than the Dark Agnes stories. I liked more than the Solomon Kane stories. I just can't warm up to that character. It feels like he's just more of a, well, he's supposed to be a Puritan, but how does that affect anything in the stories? I'm not sure how he's a different character than just a generic swordsman, but maybe I'm missing something. I'm not going to try again. I've tried many times with Solomon Kane, so it's just not for me. But so I'll stop dwelling on the negative stuff and talk about what I'm going to read next. For this character, I'm going to read Almuric and Kull. I'm going to read the Del Rey Cull collection. I don't think I have a cover of it here, which I think is probably pretty short. The Brad McMorn one is very short too. There's not a lot of Brad McMorn material, and this covers everything. Another interesting thing about the Swordwoman anthology in the ancillary, and the supplemental material talks about something I've wondered about with Howard a lot, and it's interesting to note that he was aware of it in the time he was writing and the part of the country he was in, a very small town in Texas. He really lamented in a story to Lovecraft that he really felt limited by the research materials available in his small town. The local library, whatever books he could buy, an order from a big bookstore maybe, or just whatever he could get a hold of. He wasn't near a big university or anything, I don't think. And the stories probably, in his own mind, he wasn't able to do as much with historical fiction as he wanted to do. As I started out to say before, he couldn't sell them to Adventure, which would be the best market for them. When the ones he did sell were mostly written for the same editor who edited Weird Tales, who wrote, wish I could remember his name, I really should know it. I can almost see his name, but anyway, I won't say it because I'll probably get it wrong. Anyway, his editor at Weird Tales wrote to him, Howard, and said, by the way, I'm starting a new magazine called Oriental Tales. We're looking for, straight historical adventure fiction, not supernatural fiction, taking place in Ottoman Empire, Crusades, Asia Minor, different words they had for it at that time, the Oriental world, as they called it. And that only ran a few issues. I think it ran about a year. At some point, they changed the name to Magic Carpet. Didn't really help. So it only ran for a year. So after he lost that market for these stories, I believe he stopped writing them again. And there's a lot of previously unpublished ones in here that are just as good as his published work, which is, it's kind of I guess it's encouraging to any struggling writers out there that a writer as great as Howard had a hard time selling his work. Didn't sell everything he wrote, even though he wrote a couple series characters. Well, definitely Conan, but even a couple others that were popular at the time that are still popular today. That have been made into movies. Conan's a household name today, but he did not have it that easy. These were not the highest paying markets that he was in, and it's very strange but who knows what would have happened if he'd lived. He might have gone on to been like in the 50s and 60s. He might have gone on to write, tons of historical fiction. I don't know if he would have written more Conan. Maybe he would have. Maybe after the cult of Conan started to come in, maybe he would have written more. He might have gone into just kind of general paperback fiction. Who knows? And it might have been. There's no point in speculating, really. So now I'm going to read. So this is January. I'm going to read. My official assignment for the month is King Kull. The Del Rey King Kull. Like I said, I think that's pretty short. I know I'm going to really go through that fast and enjoy it because I've read those King Kull stories before, most of them. Probably not the fragments, but and I really love them. Then I'm going to read Al Murik, his space fantasy, his Sword and Planet story. In fact, I'll probably read that first because I know I'll be able to finish them both in January. Then, just for timing wise, I want to read the Del Rey collection of all Howard's horror stories. I'm really looking forward to that, but I'm saving it for a Mayhem, Horror Mayhem. So that's May. So February, March, April, I'm going to read the three Conan books that collect all of his Conan fiction in 3 different volumes. One I think is probably just the Hour of the Dragon just by itself, and the other 2 are split up all the stories, I'm guessing. Plus a bunch of fragments and stuff. And then I will only have, and then I'll be almost at the end, May, June, then that will leave El Borak, which I'm looking forward to. I think those will be really good for basically what I've heard from people whose opinions I agree with on stuff. I think that'll be a good way to close it out. Then I've got 2 biographies to read of him over the summer. Kind of doing a thing where I'm interested in reading a lot of authors' biographies, maybe as a way of getting into more nonfiction. I'm going to read, I mentioned in my last video, I'm going to read Agatha Christie's autobiography, and which I've heard is a highly praised autobiography. And I've got a biography of John D. MacDonald I want to read. Was there one other? And these Howard ones. So I'll be doing a lot of that as I finish up reading these different books by these authors that I want to catch up on. And that's as far as I have really planned out anything. That's really all I have planned for the year. Try and get to Magic Mountain like I wanted to last year. Maybe pick something in Victober. Read a bunch of science fiction in the summer. Yeah, it's all good. All right, talk to you later.